I was born in Selma, but my family was run out of Selma by the KKK.
And she was the campus queen, president of her sorority, president of her class, and she was also Miss Alabama.
I realized that I did not have standard, ordinary parents from the beginning of my consciousness.
That was my first novel, and having a film made out of it stepped my career up.
And then they invented paintball. And the guy's infinitely mysterious.
You know, when I started spending a lot of time in Hollywood,
There was a lot of chaos and a lot of things going on.
Patricia finally just said, Charles, I want a divorce.
I read some article about octogenarians, about really successful octogenarians and what they had in common. And a lot of it had to do with maintaining curiosity and a willingness to change. A lot of people have a great deal of difficulty admitting they made a mistake. It's a famous Mark Twain line about it's easier to lie to somebody than convince them that they've been lied to.
After gaining a foothold in the literary and film worlds, Charles began to spend more time away from his family.
A certain amount of success, maybe too early, that went to my head. The movie business and all of that, 100% my fault. You know, it almost cost me my marriage, living that life.
I think a lot of times when we think there's trouble in the marriage, it's because there's trouble with ourselves. And they did not grow up in the age of talking about your feelings.
So Patricia finally just said, look, you know, this is not working for me. So she moved down to New York, and I had a winter, worst winter of my life in this house in New Hampshire. You know, I bottomed out, I was drinking too much, and I was letting everything in my life that meant anything to me down.
My father was stuck in what we now refer to, or we can refer to, as a toxic male ideal. He had very strong ideas in his head about what it meant to be a male. The humility that it takes to reach out and ask other people for help is a restructuring of this entire pattern or architecture that he had built for himself of what it means to be a man.
There's nothing unnurturing or unsympathetic or unvulnerable about true masculinity. You know, a lot of the, ideas like courage and ideas like caretaking and responsibility, these positive manifestations of masculinity. If you attach vulnerability to them, all the toxic stuff goes away.
When I recognized that I had screwed up in so many ways, that it was just a miracle that Patricia had stuck around as long as she had. And then the next phase is, well, what do I do about it? And the only answer for me was change. You gotta change.
He had been riding high, and I think he sort of finally realized what the center of his life was and what the center of his being was.
I went down to New York to see her, and we talked, and the more we talked, the more I think she began to believe me that I was serious about changing.
I decided really we wanted to keep our family together. I didn't want to hurt my kids. And he was just adamant that we were going to stay together and just rebuild as a family.
So finally she said, okay, let's give it another shot.
And he suggested, why don't we drive up to Nova Scotia?
When we lived in New Hampshire, I read about the fishing and the shooting in the Maritimes, and I started driving up here 35, 40 years ago. It was a whole variety of things that I loved that made this place feel like my spiritual home, the place where I was destined to be. And so I wanted my kids to experience it. And so I decided we were just going to take a family trip and come up here. And we came up here and it was just wonderful. It was restorative and we loved everything about the province. And it seemed to me to be what it turned out to be, a kinder, gentler, saner way of life than we had even then in America, let alone what we got now.
And that's when we found this land.
When we first saw this property, and it was mostly shrub and black spruce, so Tricia and I bushwhacked from the breakwater down there up to this point.
We walked all through this and it was all scrub. I ended up crawling through some animal trails and getting lost. And finally, we ran into each other out on the bluff and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "We have to buy this." It was the wild beauty, the space, the sea, the sky, the birds, the trees. It was everything. It was everything.
The place just reached out its arms to us and we reached out our arms to it.
Yeah, it was love at first sight, sure.
Yeah, yeah. It came to me that we needed something that was sacramental. You know, the church definition of a sacrament is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. And we needed an outward and visible sign of a new start, a new beginning. The original plan was just to have a little cabin up here, simple little cabin that we could come to from our home in New Hampshire and spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a summer. And so we brought our kids up the next summer to build it.
I think moving to Nova Scotia for them was the clean slate and the fresh page without the history that came with each of the places that they lived in their old lives. Because sometimes there's so much water under the bridge, it's time to, you know, burn the bridge and build something new.
The more I came to Nova Scotia, the more I felt like this was where my heart was. You could feel the healing going on in our family, and that was magical.
Charles and Patricia chose East Tragedy, Nova Scotia as the place to build their family cabin while also rebuilding their marriage.
I know in the early days, when they first arrived, they were really looked upon as being really kind of suspicious. Like, who are these people? What are they trying to do here? But then as people got to know them and got to know how generous and loving they were, they just accepted them completely.
Well, this is the original cabin that we built here in 1991.
We didn't know what we were doing, but it was a labor of love.
Part of the dream for this place was to create a family place that would be here years after we're gone and enjoyed by our children and our grandchildren and hopefully their children. Our daughter's boyfriend at the time was a carpenter. The rest of us had never built anything. And we came up and put up some tents on tent platforms and built this little cabin. And it was hard work. And you know, we'd go into town to take a shower at the YMCA. And we had storms up here that ripped down the tents. And they all three wanted to see Patricia and me get back together. They all three wanted to see the really special cohesiveness that we had as a family reestablished.
They never stopped and didn't ask to have any time off until the evenings because they were all avid skateboarders. So at night they built the skateboard ramp, which is now disintegrated. But they were wonderful sports, wonderful.
Yeah.
My job was to cook and clean out of the blueberry shack. And I ended up getting everybody deathly ill, and everybody was in their tents with no plumbing. Very, very sick because I was too lazy to boil water and I was exhausted from doing most of the cooking and most of the cleaning. So I was just like running stuff down and washing it off with a hose and that was fun.
Another job that I had taken on during the summer was to create this pond out here that we have and to clear some of the forest and to create fields. I wanted to have fields
Also, we do things like build this table, and you can see the legs or the counterparts to this thing.
We built all this
By
furniture.
things that we found and brought in here. And we laid that hearth.
I painted this table.
I know, it's lovely, isn't it?
I'm pretty proud of that.
I know, he is proud of it.
Painting job. It did become more like the family days that we had when they were little, when we were everything to each other. Our kids were our best friends.
And every day we would get a little bit more work done, and it was fun, except for when we were fighting or throwing up.
You could feel the cohesion. It's like feeling a broken arm start to heal. The healing going on in our family as this cabin went up. And that was magical. There was a great feeling of accomplishment and relief once we got the roof on, and celebratory moment. So to have things come together and to be able to look at it, you know, and say, here it is. It's a little house
It's something.
that we made. Is just a wonderful experience. And we got albums of all the pictures that we took that summer. And, you know, I go back and look at that and still get this swelled heart of pride and love for how they, you know, did what they had to do to not only build this place, but to rebuild our marriage. We built the cabin in '91, and we built this bigger place in 2000. So it was actually 9 years that we lived in the cabin.
And the bathroom was really pretty dysfunctional. Do you remember?
You remember it was an indoor outhouse
That's right.
for a while.
That's right.
We thought that was a brilliant idea, to have an indoor outhouse.
It didn't work.
Turned out not
ultimately.
to be a good idea at
No.
all. And the more I came to Nova Scotia, the more I felt like this was where my heart was. It's just an instinctual thing. You just feel it. We're in my writing shack, and where I do all of my work, because it has no phone, has no internet, and so I don't get bothered down here. I've written for television, I've written for film, written hundreds and hundreds of magazine articles, a number of nonfiction books, and I also write fiction, so I never get bored.
During the construction of the cabin, the editor of Men's Journal magazine asked Charles to do an article about the family's experience. That article was later expanded into the book, A Family Place.
We had a lot of people who came up who said, you know, that this book saved our marriage. We had people call us from all over parts of Canada and in the U.S., and a lot of them came up here.
For those of us that have, longings to be closer to our Father and longings to have a successful definition of masculinity and manhood and what does it mean to be a father and a husband, and it speaks to a lot of those issues in a way that isn't corny. If you read that book, A Friendship with Charles happens pretty fast, because that book gets you on first base. I mean, if he's showing you who he is.
At some point, most of us, if not all of us, crater out and get to a point where we have to rebuild or give up. And this book is about rebuilding, literally and figuratively.
In 1994, I came across the book called A Family Place. Read it several times, and it just became my anthem. I was invited to a party down in Trackety, where Charles and Patricia live. And so it was around 10 o'clock at night, and this spectacular-looking couple walked in the room. We realized that we had fine arts in common, and she was telling me a little bit about herself as an artist, and then I asked her what her husband did, and she said, well, he's a writer. And I asked, well, what does he write? And she said, well, his most recent project is a book called A Family Place. And at that point, I just lost it. And I can't believe I'm meeting you. I love your book. I've just read it so many times. And so they were so amused by me, I think, that somehow we just became instant friends that night. And we saw each other regularly after that, and that was 25 years ago.
If you write from the heart, which Faulkner said famously in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech is the only place to write from, it's gonna touch people.
Everybody, I think, loves this idea of second chance. and everybody should be given a second chance. And when you see someone like my father do the work involved to regain the trust and rebuild his marriage with my mother, then the takeaway is maybe it's not too late for me to repair whatever needs to be repaired.
In a life that has a lucky life, that for 80 years has, you know, I've just had wonderful things happen in my life, and I've been very fortunate. And the thing I'm proudest of, the thing that has given me and Patricia the most satisfaction, is the creation of this place and the devotion to it that our children feel.
Once you read Family Place, it's very easy to fall in love with Nova Scotia.
Just feel this total feeling that this is where I belong and I'm not longing for anything else.
Having built the family cabin and rebuilt their marriage, the Gaines family continued to visit Nova Scotia, falling more in love with it each time.
What we're going to be looking at is my attempt to establish my own labyrinth, which this year is 3 years old. I'm going to let this grow up so you won't even be able to tell where the center of the labyrinth is. This is like a work of art or sculpture on my own land, but also it's a spiritual tool and a psychological tool, because you're supposed to make the walk by yourself and you pay attention to what your thoughts are that come up. It's like a waking dream. And apparently about 3/4 of the way through finishing it, you have a realization.
I read Family Place it had just come out when I first came up here. Greta had told me about it. And once you read Family Place, it's very easy to fall in love with Nova Scotia.
I love the people. I love the topography. I love the rivers, from fishing, hiking, whale watching, sailing, mountain biking. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Sometimes my kids call it the Shire. For the Tolkien fans out there, the Shire doesn't really feel all the disturbances of Sauron and kings and queens. And the Shire just kind of does its own thing, and there's a strength in that.
These Acadian communities are all built around family. Family is the center of everything. That was what appealed to us about this and still continues to. They could not have been more hospitable.
It's true.
And kinder and more generous.
It's true, they dropped off
When
food.
we had that big storm,
Yeah.
and we were living in these tents that were right out here where the blueberry shack is, and they were all just leveled. Boom. We'd spent the whole night trying to keep the tent from falling on us and guy it up and put rocks around the bottom of it, and nobody got any sleep. And we had a dirt road put in at that time. Car after car in this community came up. Some of these people we knew, some of them we didn't know, bringing blankets, sleeping bags, pies, cakes, fresh water. I mean, it was just this unbelievable show of support for people who they had no reason to support, except that it was in their blood.
It's been an evolution for all of us and for the people on our road and the people in the community who are so accepting, and I'm just grateful, just grateful.
Every time I think about, being in the third act of my life, I think of them and I think, man, they're still going strong. They're still so brilliant. They're still together. They're still so happy. They're still contributing so much.
They wouldn't have developed as artists the way that they have if they hadn't been in Nova Scotia. I really believe that, because their time up there, their creative time, it fills the well socially and spiritually.
And there's constant inspiration from the beauty of the place, and the water and the birds and the changes. There's a kind of magic here.
And so here she is. She's like a world-class artist. She's exhibiting in New York. She's exhibiting in Los Angeles. And yet she still has such regard for her own community that she exhibits here at St. FX University, at the Art Gallery in Inverness,
And that's what's remarkable about both Charles and Patricia, is they found a way to keep doing what they're doing and to make an impression and contribute and do it their own way. Charles is a wonderful leader in that regard about, it's your obituary, it's your time on the planet, you can do what you want to do. He was very clear about life being long and you don't know where it's going to take you, but if you stifle the world's going to stifle plenty. You don't need to stifle yourself.
Especially now in a post-COVID world where people are starting to reimagine how to live their lives, and maybe I don't have to follow the path. Science and technology is changing, and Americans maybe need to start learning to redefine the golden years as maybe not the time of settling down and giving up and putting your feet up, but the time to really dig in for your deepest passions.
Anytime you go into a new culture, you're going to grow from it, and you're going to learn new things about humanity, new things about culture that you didn't know before. All those things inform your work. I think specifically to East Tracadie, the pure humanity here, the kindness of the people and the generosity of the people has influenced my work a lot. And I find myself writing with a more open heart than I ever did before, because open hearts is all you encounter here.
You know, one of the things that I learned most from Charles is that happiness is the result of a life well lived. It's not a pursuit in of itself. The way he's lived his life, he's lived a disciplined life. He takes care of his dogs.
So sorry. She wanted to get in on the interview.
Well, she did very well. She did very well for a long time. You look so beautiful.
Oh, honey. Thank you. I needed that.
To do this, I think is the best decision we ever made, was buying this piece of land.
This place is as close to paradise as we will get in this life.
I know both my parents want their ashes to be laid in Nova Scotia and want to leave a new legacy for us and for our kids and for generations to come, because Nova Scotia more closely reflects their values now than any other place in the world.
I never want to leave here. People say, come meet me in town, do this, travel, go this and that. Just feel this total feeling that this is where I belong, and I'm not longing for anything else. I'm just longing for the privilege of experiencing this for as long as I'm able.
Keats had this theory, for all of us there's a special place that when you come into it, you recognize it as being the place where you are best able to flourish, where you feel most whole, most yourself. And that when you enter it, when you come into it, you almost automatically recognize it. That's the sense that we had up here. I had it the minute I met Nova Scotia on that first trip. You know, I knew the minute I drove into Nova Scotia that this was where I was meant to be. My name is Charles Gaines.
My name is Patricia Gaines.
And here I am.
And here I am.